Hello, folks, and welcome to Croke Park. It's myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as ever by Michael Verney. We're previewing the All-Ireland final between Kilkenny and Limerick. One of the big discussion topics at the moment beforehand is Barry Nash out? Are there other players? Massey Keown we're hearing, is he out? But Barry Nash, I was talking to Jim Bob Ryan, former captain of Limerick back around 2014 and so on, and he was saying, unless he fell down the stairs last night, he's gone.
It's amazing what you hear the day before or the morning of a match. Obviously, last year they did have a couple of knocks. I think on the Friday night, David Reedy and Kyle Hayes picked up knocks, but they were both fine to play. David Blanchfield was actually out on the pitch as well. Talk of him having a very serious injury coming out of the semi-final. I'd be very surprised if he starts, and that's going to force a bit of a rejig in Kilkenny. But we'll know in about half an hour, I'd say, who's going to be taking their places. And then we can kind of maybe get into even a bit closer to who's going to pick up who. But there's just there's a lot of unknowns at the moment, and I think that's what makes it so exciting, really.
I'm hearing about two cruciates in training in Limerick in the last week. I suppose most people have heard at this stage, Richie English and Jimmy Quilty. So you go through this defence, and I know Quilty isn't necessarily a back, but down Sean Finn, down Declan Hannon, down Richie English, eventually this is going to have to add up a little bit for Limerick. Like, they've looked so impervious for so long, but between teams coming closer to them this year, throughout a lot of the year, and all these injuries, is now a perfect time for your Kilkenny team.
My Kilkenny team. You'd imagine, like, Richie English is an all-star cornerback. Sean Finn is a four-time all-star cornerback. Like, that's a specialist position, particularly nowadays, to be without two of your best. Like, English has come on in 3 championship games this year. He's played probably the guts of about an hour, I'd say, and that's crucial that you're able to bring in a lad who is not dropping the standards at all. The worry from a Limerick point of view would be, just say if Mike Casey picks up a knock. He didn't finish, obviously, the All-Ireland in 18. I think he was off with 20 minutes to go. And only they had Richie McCarthy and Tom Condon and a few other guys to bring in. So they're very light in that respect. And that will definitely be a worry. But maybe then you'll see Gerard Hegarty maybe slip back to wing back if they have to. Or Kyle Hayes will slip back in somewhere. They'll firefight however they have to firefight. But they will pick up a couple of knocks because it's the nature of an All-Ireland final. But that would be a nagging worry for Kylie and co.
I'm very interested to see how the weather affects it. I'm living up in Dublin, and the last day and a half, it has been raining cats and dogs, and that's not a turn of phrase because Kilkenny are in this. But it has just, yesterday it was teeming down, and I was like, how are they going to hurl in this? Yesterday morning, I was out at the training pitch. One of the goals was waterlogged. So obviously this is an unbelievable pitch here in Croke Park. I might turn the camera around in a second just to show you the players walking around. But does it change? I don't think it's an advantage to either team really, but it's just going to change the type of game we have.
Yeah, like even the Curragh was called off today. There's a big meeting in the Curragh today. It's completely waterlogged. They're the types of conditions we've had over the last couple of days. This is the best pitch in the country as regards drainage. But if you look out there in the middle of the pitch, just down about 10 yards in from the tunnel, like they're sweeping grass, they're trying to take a bit of surface water off. It will affect conditions. I see John Keenan warming up down the far sideline as well. A massive day for him. He's getting the blood flowing, getting the heart rate up before a massive game, and he's going to have to be on his game. And hopefully he'll be doing something like he did in the Munster final last year. But conditions are going to be tricky, definitely. I don't think Limerick or Kilkenny are going to be able to shoot from their own 65 as much today. Probably you're not going to be, the strike is not going to be as reliable. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised, Limerick particularly, if they change tack, if Burns delivers a bit more ball in, if Hayes delivers a bit more ball in, rather than maybe taking on those shots themselves. And like, if you're able to bag 2 or 3 goals today, you're in a big position. So I'd say they'll try and pepper the ball in around that D, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see Bo Flanagan and Galán get a goal today.
I'm actually looking out there. You know, when you're allowed out on the pitch maybe an hour beforehand or an hour and a half before, whatever it is at this stage. Actually, it's throwing half 3 or 4.
Half 3, yeah.
I actually just show up to the match these days. I show up very early, not entirely sure who throws in. But you're allowed out on the pitch maybe an hour or so beforehand. You're not allowed to bring out the hurley and puck around. So you can see lads out there doing kicky up with the ball, keepy uppies, whatever, and just throwing it around to each other. The Limerick lads looks relaxed as ever. Sure, they've been doing this for God knows how many years.
It's funny. I think nearly every Limerick player is aware than that, and then you had Keane Lynch with a tracksuit bottom with the white socks tucked in. Like, he's just a little bit different, and I think a lot of Limerick people are expecting a massive performance from him. Probably got big minutes under his belt the last day. He's had a fairly interesting season this year, like he had last year, and yeah, a lot of people expecting him to really click today. But you say about Limerick are seasoned hands at this. The one thing you're guaranteed with Limerick is they will show up. Name a game really where they haven't shown up. Probably the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final didn't show up for the first 20 minutes. We're chasing the whole way. You're fairly sure that they're going to show up. You're fairly sure that Kilkenny are going to show up to some respect, but there's definitely a few doubts. And I don't know if he said it on Monday's show. Like, to me, if Kilkenny are going to win today, there's 3 players I pick out that have to have big games. Tommy Walsh, I think Tom Phelan, and Billy Ryan. I think fringe-ish kind of players, if you get me, they're all going to have to play well. They're all going to have to contribute. If 1 or 2 of them is beaten in their duel, I think they're in a bit of trouble. I think a few of those lads, those 3 in particular, are going to have to really put the shoulders out and probably maybe deliver a performance in a Kilkenny shirt that we haven't seen yet.
So Kilkenny are going to have to rejig a little bit if Dave Blanchfield isn't playing, and we're all hearing that he's not going to play. Look, we'll wait and see. I mean, as we're speaking now, we're not entirely sure. Dara Corcoran would seem the most like-for-like type player, just the size profile and all that, but he probably hasn't seemed the most favoured so far. There's other talk of maybe Walter comes in, maybe John Donnelly moves out the field, and maybe Conor Fogarty moves into wing back. We'll see. So we'll see how does that kind of, in terms of like Dara Donovan and Cian Lynch, who'll pick up who. But I think that the full backline for Kilkenny, I think Mikey Butler is going to pick up Peter Casey and travel with him like he did with Tony Kelly, albeit different players, but he's shown he's comfortable out the pitch. Hugh Lawler has to be on Aaron Gallan. Gallan had his knee patched up last year. I don't think he was at 100%. He'll fancy a big game here. I think Tommy Walsh, like, I'm not saying he's the best player in the air in the world, but Flanagan, he does have that athleticism, and I'd say Tommy Walsh should be able to fancy himself keeping into him.
That's a big jewel. I think that's a big jewel, and they need to break even or more in that type of jewel. If you saw how kind of Walsh was maybe thrown to one side by O'Donnell for the goal the last day, very competent player, obviously Seamus Flanagan. And while he's probably a bit unheralded this year, he scored 4-9. He has come up with huge goals, and he's generally played well in All-Ireland finals. He had a huge final in 18, I remember. Those are the type of jewels. Mikey Butler, he's probably matched up perfectly with Casey. If Blanchfield is out, I wouldn't be that surprised potentially if he went out to the half line and a stopping job on Tom Morrissey, maybe. Gerard Hegarty obviously has 3-14 from play in the last 3 All-Ireland finals. But to me, he's not moving the same as previous years. I don't think he's opening up as well. I don't think he's going on that 50 or 60 yard run where his legs are really open up and he's galloping up ground. I don't think he's getting away from lads maybe this year as much as he was last year, but he's going to have a big game as well. Like, Gallan was relatively quiet in last year's All-Ireland, but Hegarty stepped up at 1-5. Who's going to step up today? Morrissey's been unbelievably consistent in finals. I think he got 4 in last year's final. I know you were saying on one of the shows, like, if you look at it, Kilkenny hit 226 last year, did 15 different scores, and they still didn't win the game. So much went right for them, I would say, and they still didn't win the game. Are they a better side this year?
Well, what I would say is, right, so last year, Limerick were trying to paper over the cracks in the forward line, because they didn't have Cian Lynch and Peter Casey. This year, they're obviously down so many players, Finn, Hannon, and even Richie English in the back line. And I'm actually looking at their bench, and I'm asking, who's going to come into the full back line if there's an injury back there? So already Dan Morrissey, I should say, has moved into the full back line. Already, like, from the half back line in previous years, Barry Nash is obviously formerly a forward. He's in the back line. Mike Casey's obviously an inside back, so no problem there. But Aaron Costello is the only player on the bench for Limerick that I would say is an inside back. And he is a good player, plays midfield for Kilmallock. Yeah. So I actually really wonder what happens if there's another injury back there. Hopefully there aren't any injuries, because you've got Owen Cody, TJ Reid, Billy Ryan, and Mossy Keown. We'll see if he plays or not as well. But there's scores to be had in there if enough ball goes in. And then maybe Limerick, they're having to dig too deep in the panel, and ultimately that could cost them. Yeah,
Aaron Costello is the only natural inside defender on the bench. So that would definitely be a worry. Plus, it's grand saying that he's an inside defender. Like, how much championship time has he played in the last 5 years? Like, he could be putting a lad in. Bringing Richie English in was like, okay, he's road tested. Yeah. He's played in an All-Ireland final. He's been part of it. If you have to bring Costello in, I'm sure there'll be a rejig. But even like Dermot Byrne's not a natural inside defender. O'Donoghue's not. Hayes is not. None of them are. So I'm sure Kylie and co have gone through all these variables, all these possible questions, all these things that could happen. They are nagging doubts though. And like I remember chatting Brendan Cummins there recently enough about 2010. He said it's one thing like taking down the dynasty, but we had the bit of luck as well. Henry went off. Tennyson was injured. Brian Hogan was injured as well. And you just think from the Kilkenny point of view, you're thinking, maybe the stars are aligning. Maybe the stars are aligning. The most successful captain in hurling history is missing. The Sean Flynn is the most all-stars of any Limerick current player at the moment. He's the one that shuts down, he firefights in that Limerick full back, and he picks up the opposition, the best opposition inside player, and they're both not there. So maybe you're thinking from a Kilkenny point of view, the stars are aligning. I still don't see it. I still think this is not a Limerick team that were surviving in Munster. Like, they were surviving. They were hanging on by the skin of their teeth. They've rode out that storm. Their best performance or their best 45 minutes was in the semi-final. And they're not hanging on anymore. I think they're thriving now, and I expect their best performance of the year today.
Yeah, I think they're building towards a performance, and that's even within certain players. Like Hegarty, you're 100% right. He hasn't really shown the same stuff that he showed in previous years, but I think it was coming there in the semi-final. I think Lynch was coming a little bit in the semi-final as well. There are obviously those issues in the backline that we've talked about, but I still think you look at that middle eight: Diarmuid Burns, Will O'Donoghue, Kyle Hayes, Darragh Donovan, Keane Lynch, Hegarty, Reedy, Tom Morrissey. There's a lot of quality there. Aaron Gallan's an absolute killer in the front, so I think they'll get through. One last point to talk about: Killian Buckley did have his wedding yesterday. The players were at his wedding yesterday. I feel sorry for the bride, because obviously it was supposed to be a day all about her, but you'd imagine it was dry enough in terms of boozing occasion. But look, I mean, that's such his life. You marry a Kilkenny hurler, sometimes hurling's going to get in the way.
Oh, I said they had their Philippines last night. I said they did. I said they were all gone pretty quickly. I was only chatting to someone there. Like, did they have the lunch boxes with the pasta and chicken, or did they have the bit of gravy, as Taggy Fogarty said a couple of weeks ago? Listen, if they win the All-Ireland, they'd be like, oh, it's the best thing ever. The lads were able to go and switch off. If they lose and lads are in any way drained or not up to the pitch of it today, it'll be like, oh, geez, that was a disaster. So the winners will write the script. The scoreline will decide whether that was a good or bad thing. But they're all fairly experienced. And you know what? From a Kilkenny point of view as well, the few rookies that they had playing last year's All-Ireland final, they have that experience under their belt as well. Maybe it's like Tipperary been beaten in 09 and they're primed for today.
Yeah.
I think I'm playing devil's advocate, though. I think Limerick will get the job done by 4 or 5 in the wind-up. I think it'll be tight throughout, but I think Limerick will push on coming down the home stretch. And Kilkenny will have to get goals, and I think they'll need 3 goals to win today.
I know Cody could be the man, and obviously TJ Reid as well, who we haven't spoken much about. The comments are flying in. The Castle Winsell stockroom, Tim. He also had Seamus the scruffy-looking one for once today. Thanks for that. And Porter says, expect Hayes to play more as an extra forward. Look, we'll see how it all pans out.
Just a quick one as well, Shane, before we go. In a couple of minutes, the Offaly 98 team will be paraded around the Silver Jubilee. I don't think there's ever been a better year of hurling than the long hot summer of 98. You could write a book on Clare alone, let alone Offaly and the Sheep in the Heap and Michael Bond coming in and all that. But those boys are getting their day in it's not the sun anyway, they're getting their day in the rain here in Croke Park today.
Yeah, the rain is spitting here at Croke Park. We're about an hour from throw in as we chat here, so we can't wait for it. Chat to you all soon and keep the comments coming in.